Welcome to video 2 of the video assembly guide for the de Havilland Dragon Rapide. This particular video is going to take you through the assembly of the fuselage. We're on to the next step of the build, and this is what we hope to achieve at the end of this step, and that is the fuselage frame, the airframe for the Dragon Rapide. And as you can see here, not only is it mainly created using the 2mm foam, but also we have got a lot of wires installed into it as well. These are a combination of some of the extension cables for the servos in the wings, motor extension cables, and some LEDs as well. And it's best that we install it at this particular point, and we'll go through that in the build. Apart from that, we've got some other materials as well, a few little bits of plastic, some magnets once again, and a few little stickers too. And also I've got my cup of tea here, which always helps. Right, okay, let's begin. The fuselage airframe is mainly made from 2mm, and you get a single sheet dedicated to that particular build. This is sheet 2, and all of the parts here are used in the build of the fuselage airframe. Now, it looks quite complicated, but it actually goes together pretty easily, and I'll show you how that occurs. Okay, well, let me cut out some of the parts that we'll need for the first few steps, and we'll get cracking. So here we have D21, 22, 23, 24, 25 and 26. These parts are the make up the nose piece of the airframe, and they simply slot together, and you can do this without needing any glue to start off with. Just if you want to test fit which way round the parts would best be put. You've also got on D23 here, there's a score along there, and that's supposed to allow this top part to flex. As you can see, it slots into D21 here, and then there is an angle. Just put it across there. There's an angle that it shoots off at. Now, the scores generally aren't that deep. So if you need to release that score a little bit, you can run a knife through that score very carefully, very gently, and then that should allow the top part there to bend away as required. So that slots in there like that. That folds neatly like so. D24, as you can see, it's all it slots together like a slotty thing. I don't know what best to call it, but everything should quite easily come together, and it's pretty obvious how it all goes. So as you can see, it all holds together quite neatly. Now, I'm not going to leave it like this. This is just a quick dry fit to demonstrate how you can just make sure that everything is as it should be, and you can understand the way that the parts go together. What we can then do is just break it all down and start applying the glue to the parts. So let's pop part right at the front of the aircraft on. Add a little bit of glue, a decent amount of glue here. It is right at the front on the nose. I'm sure with my ability in the air, it will end up on its nose on more than one occasion, I'm sure. So there is D22. I'll just make sure that it is sitting at right angles to the central part, the front keel, whatever we want to call it. And then we can start applying glue to attach our next piece of the frame. Just make sure we've got a little in the slot there. And these parts, as you've seen, would quite happily sit together all day without any glue, but obviously the glue stops everything shifting around, which is what we want. And then when parts are slotted in, they should come to a flush bit with the fuselage, or leave a 2mm gap, which is the depth of this material. Okay, let's just add a little more glue. I'm just putting it in blobs. The act of sliding the part down usually draws the glue, if it's wet enough, into the areas where it's needed. As you can see, this part here sits 2mm above the keel part itself, and that's because you've got another part that will go on top of there and slot in. Okay, now onto our D25, which it's a little more complicated. It doesn't just slide in. You push the piece at the front, the tab at the front, into a slot. These slide into the two parts on D24, and obviously we push the central part down onto the tabs on the keel itself. So there's a little more glue to add here. I'll just add it where it's going to sit. And then just a little sides here, just to stop it flapping around. And then we can pop our parts together. Go that nice little click. It's the tight fit of the slots and tabs click into place, and then we can just press everything home. And the great thing about this glue is that it's once it's dried off, we can just keep making sure that everything is positioned correctly. There we go. Excellent. Right, on to our final piece, which is the rear bulkhead of the hatch part of the fuselage, which is essentially where the cockpit of the aircraft is. And just pop that on with a modest amount of the sticky stuff. go. And then we can pop that to one side and let it dry off. And we can move on to the next stage. So I've got 3 of the 4mm magnets here that are included in the pack. And I'm going to pop them into the holes that are cut in the bulkhead there, and the little hole that's on the forward bulkhead of the cockpit. So let's do that now. First of all, as they roll away, not out of shot though, so that's good. Just add a little glue to the hole. All 3 holes, I should say. Excellent. And then split them up. Certainly grab one. Take it with the tweezers. Pop it in the hole. Go. On to the next one. Well, these neodymium magnets are really strong for their size. If you find it's gone in a little bit too far, then just nudge it forward a bit. But I'll show you a little trick in a minute that'll also help. But it's got to be done before the glue completely dries. Okay, we'll go for our final. And obviously we want these to go into the holes and they need to be flush. And they don't stop or impede the hatch going on. Right, now what I need is some stickers. So on the sticker sheet you should have a fair amount of S1s here, which are the little circular stickers that go over the magnets all over the kit. I've actually got 8 here, but there should be 11 or 12 on the sheets that that you receive in the kit. So let's just prise one of those stickers off. There we go. Now I'm using the knife to help apply and position these stickers, but be aware that the obviously the magnets will be attracted to the knife as well, so keep it as far away as possible, and then pop that on like so, and then we'll get there we go, on to the next one, put that on, it's covered. And then on to the third. And of course what these stickers do is they help to retain the magnet in place, so they don't actually come off at any point during popping the hatch off. There we go. Now the little trick I said earlier of getting the magnets properly in place is now they're covered with a sticker. You can then just pop the back of the knife onto the sticker, and just firstly it helps stick the sticker down, and the other thing it does is attract the magnet right up to the back of the sticker. There we go. Stickers in place. Right, on to the next section. Really, the only two parts we need for the next part of the build are the two side panels of the fuselage. These are the D27, D28, I think. So let me just cut those out from here, and then we'll carry on with the build. So we've got our two parts now. Just clear out a few of the leftover bits of swarf. Okay, and maybe a little bit of trimming of where we have cut the part off from the sheet. That all looks good. There's a little bit of the nose there. This is where having a nice sharp knife really helps for trimming, and this material does a lot better when the knife is decently sharp. That's why I like using these scalpel blades, surgeon's blades. Okay, so there are our two halves. Let's bring back on our nose piece, and we're actually going to start assembling from the front of the aircraft rearwards. And so once again, the old dry fitting technique works very well here. So you can just match everything up, make sure it all fits very well. Now at the front here, you really are sort of bending the material round to fit, or to conform. So you can actually, if you want to, just sort of tape things together until they are set, or you can obviously use the grab of the foam to foam once it has set. So up to you, up to you. So anyway, put that on the wrong side. It doesn't really matter. They're both they're both symmetrical. They're not. They can be used either side. Yeah, they really are exactly the same. So, but what I tend to do is have the top of the cut where the material was cut from. So in this instance, this is D27. It was that way round on the sprue where I could see the number, and so that's the way that's going to be the outer part of the aircraft. So that pops on that side, and you can just, by dry fitting, familiarize yourself with the positions of all of the parts relative to one another, and then we can start applying the glue and sticking it all together. So let's crack on. So this nose piece, you've got part of the side panel comes down onto the cutout, and a little sits behind. We'll just add it to all the surfaces that the side panel comes into contact with on its flat surfaces, and then on its where the slots come into play. So on this top part of the bulkhead, it's just the back. The front is left open because that's where the hatch goes. But on all of the other tabs, it's actually on both sides. Had to think there. So we'll get a bit of glue on both sides too. Oh, not on that side. Oh yes, on that side. Yes, we can have it on there. Right. So, as we did during the dry run, let's pop it all together. Make sure everything is sitting where it should. And then at the front here, I'm obviously letting the part sit there, and then I'm letting it pull away. We'll let the glue dry, and then reapply. Push it home once the glue is set. This glue has now dried, so I can pop that onto the nose, safe in the knowledge that it will stick down. This part of the fuselage here bends in slightly, so we can just make sure that that all sits where it's supposed to, and we can apply some glue to this area and get the other side of the fuselage on, which I'll do now and come back to you once we're about to apply. Glue in all of the critical areas now, so we will pop our fuselage part on. And then once again, make sure glue gets onto both surfaces, and then we can let them come apart for a while until that glue gets well and truly tacky. So there we have the first part of the fuselage sides on. So next we want to start putting more and more of the bulkheads in place to create or go down the full length of the fuselage right to the end. So let me get the parts that are needed for that. I'll put that just there, and we will carry on. So here we have the next part of the build, which is our D.89 bulkhead, which is this part here. And as you can see, it also has spars for the inner parts of the wing as well. We've also got some structural parts, D30, two D30s, and we've got some plastic parts, both P7, and they actually, as you can see, they mirror the bottom half of the D.29 part, and that's exactly where they go to reinforce it in the model itself. So the first thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to pop our P30s in place. Now these actually sit at the top of the part here. They're not as wide as the part itself, but what you do is you position it centrally using the little cutout in the center to marry up to the cutout on the D.29. And what these actually do is they create, and they're on either side of the bulkhead, they create little cavities within the structure that accept the little sort of plywood, I suppose, what would you call them? The sort of positioning structures for the wings, for the upper wings in this case, so that they also obviously that these are angled at the correct dihedral for the model, so they induce some dihedral into the wing as well. Dihedral setters, let's call them that. Not a particularly elegant name, but there we go. So what I'm going to do is just apply some glue to the one side of this And I'm not really going to worry whether I spill over into the areas that are within that little cavity, because that glue will dry by the time it comes to popping the top wings on. And of course, the wings aren't designed to be removable, so once they're in, they're in. Let's just position that in place. And then we can turn our attentions to the other side and just apply glue to the other D30 part. And we'll plop that in place. Okay, just make sure they're flush with the top of the bulkhead. Give them a bit of a squeeze, and then they can sort themselves out, drying off. In the meantime, we can add our P7 parts, and they literally go either side, like the D30 parts. They actually sit either side of the bulkhead, so we can apply these one at a time. And once again, you've got these little cutouts at the end here. Once again, our little plywood dihedral setters slot into that once we've built the outer wings for the lower part of the aircraft. I'm just going to add a smear of glue to the back of all of this. It's amazing how this transforms the 2mm foam, which is, as you will no doubt have found out, very flexible. It really stiffens it up, especially when applied to both sides. Just pops on there. Just push it home, make sure all these slots line up. And the other thing we want to make sure is that the little cavities that we have for our plywood dihedral setting system are they're not too closed up or too wide apart, just sitting just right. There we go. I've just noticed on this is not on your kit, but on here, one of the sides of the P7 part has not been adjusted, so I'm just going to lob that off. You won't have to do that because on the cut files it's already been adjusted. So didn't do a particularly good job on that, so go again. There we go. And whilst I've got it here, I can sort it out before the next one gets applied. So, because the other thing you could do is, rather than apply to the back of the plastic, you could actually apply the glue to the foam part itself. So we'll do that just by way of demonstration that there is, as we say in the UK, more than one way to skin a cat, which is quite a vile saying. Really is. Nobody goes around skinning cats anymore, I hope. There we go, all in place. So, and now what you can do is just lie that on a flat surface. If you want to weight it just to make sure it stays nice and flat, you can, of course. So I'll just set that to one side and wait until the glue dries before we move on. Okay, so we have a nice solid part. Now, there's obviously there's a little bit of flex there, but that plastic's really doing its work, which is fantastic. And now we can install this into our fuselage. And it's the next slot along it goes into. So that basically, once again, we can dry fit just to make sure it all slots nicely into place. And that's where it sits. So we can glue it up now. Make sure it stays there. There is no particular way around that this has to go. It is a symmetrical part. So let's just get the glue on to hold it in place. Oh, it's gone very quiet all of a sudden. Must be time for another cup of tea very soon. Let's put this into place. This is obviously a very, very different method than it would be using balsa wood or more traditional materials, and it's designed so that the more parts that you add, the truer the fuselage becomes. So there's no jigging required, just jiggling. Sorry. So there we go. That's now in place. Once again, once the glue is set, you can give it one last sort of push just to make sure everything holds, because there are some slight curves and contours that notice that's poking out a little bit, so you can see it's excellent material for just adjusting here and there as you go. So good. Right, let me get the next part on the board and we can continue the build. So this next part, D31, this is actually this is located on sheet 3 of the 2mm foam, which I didn't realise. I should have done because I was the one that put it there. Yeah, this is actually not located on that large sheet that I showed you. It's on another sheet that includes the hatch for the fuselage and some of the wing parts. So just be aware of that when you're looking for it and thinking, where the hell has it gone? Which I inevitably did. So we've got this is really only a half bulkhead, and we've got a P8 plastic part to go on top of the D31 part. Once again, it is a symmetrical part, so you can put it either way around. Obviously, with the plastic part, it's better to put the adhesive on the shiny side, the unprinted side, and that gives better contact, and it looks better. Although this will all be hidden once the aircraft is fully built. So let's just pop some glue onto our plastic part. And obviously we want good adhesion between this plastic part and the foam. And once again, obviously it's used to stiffen the part up, give it a little more structure. It's only on the one side, so it's the part itself doesn't need to be completely rigid. In fact, it does actually, with the wing shape, it flexes forward slightly, because the wings are angled as well. They're not just straight planks. So let's just pop that into place. Once again, make sure all the slots line up. And there we go. So we can pop that once again to one side on a flat surface, and if necessary, weight it. I think that should be all right, like so. And I'll get preparing the next lot of parts to put on, and then we'll install that onto the fuselage. So I've really gone to town here with the next set of parts, and we've got D32, 33, 34, 35, 36, and 37. And these run down the next number of slots in the fuselage. So this one's going down here. But before we do that, we're just going to install the part that we've brought together, and that goes into this little slot down here. So once again, we'll dry fit. I've got the plastic side facing forward, but it's neither here nor there whether it is. So that's where it sits, like that. So we'll just add a tad of glue. To the surfaces that come into contact. Go. And then pop our parts into place. There we go. Right, let's get the rest of these bulkheads in place. We have D32. I'm going to dry fit this, but then I'm going to rattle on through, detach all the others as I'm going to assume that they will all fit beautifully, only because this is probably my 12th fuselage build. Not all of them have resulted in flying aircraft. In fact, only one has, but during the development process of these kits, you tend to do a lot of building, which it really helps to obviously bring things off the the drawing board, so to speak, although the drawing board these days is a digital one. But the real world is always a little bit different. So you draw, you build, or you draw, you cut, you build, you redraw, you reimagine, you do all sorts of things. But actually, obviously, making the aircraft is what helps the design process the most, because you can make decisions from that are real world decisions rather than digital decisions. So, as I said, I'm not going to dry fit. Not going. It seems to be a habit, really. But yeah, I mean, this is a very quick way of building up an airframe. It's obviously there's no sanding required. You don't have to pin anything to a board or attach to a jig. It should literally just piece together. Now, these bulkheads will certainly help, but they're not the sort of final shaping of the fuselage, because we've got a top and a bottom to put on as well, which essentially creates a box, and that then becomes extremely stable. And then, of course, we wrap the box as well. So just trim the base of that. Okay. Well, let me carry on with this. It's not something that you have to watch the entirety of, and I'll start the video again once we get to something interesting. So we're nearly at the end here. We've got the last piece to insert, and just a point to note, you'll notice that the ones that I have installed, the last 4 at least, have the little tab that will go through the piece that sits on top in the center. So they all follow that same pattern, so you don't get them upside down. Now, the parts themselves are slightly tapered anyway towards the top, and of course they're numbered as well. You get the numbers the right way up, and you're doing well. So the final piece we're going to pop in, which is slightly different, but it goes in with the same technique. So we'll just add the glue and put it in place. There we go. As you can see, the fuselage is forming up nicely. It's fairly stable now, although it's got a bit of a wiggle about it because it hasn't got the top and bottom of the box on. So all those parts are in place. we can now move on, and I think we now start popping the underside of the aircraft on. So I'll get that part ready, and we'll come back and I'll show you how best to apply that to the aircraft. Actually, before we apply the base to the fuselage, we are going to just attach the hinge for the rudder, and that is part P9. You can see down here. Let's just get that out of the way for now. So we've got the full board. Let's just cut this out. There we go. Right, this part itself has a number of scores. Firstly, we've got the scores that run down here and here, and these actually are to activate the hinge. They're to weaken the material slightly there, although obviously not break, so that the hinge is fairly flexible. And there's another score which is here, and that allows us to just bring the parts together like so. Now, what we need to do is we just need to glue these two pieces together. We don't want to glue this part of these two pieces together. So I'm going to apply the glue to the one side here. I'm not going to go over that hinge line, and just apply it to essentially that quarter. And then I'm going to fold it and just make sure that the glue transfers to the other side, and then I'll let that fall open like so. And in fact, what we're going to do, once we've glued these, pinched these two pieces together, is we're going to cut down this score line here, and it'll release these two pieces to sort of flap open, and you'll see why we do that shortly afterwards. So let's just let that dry off a little bit, and then we'll come back and pop it all together. Right, let's bring that together like so, and then we want to divide these two parts. So I'm just going to go in there with the knife, slice it through. So these two parts should now splay open like so. So what we now do, as this is the hinge, this actually now sits just here at the tail and brings the two halves of the fuselage sides together. So we need to apply some glue either side of the hinge, so, and on the other side. And that needs inserting like here. Now, position wise, once we've got some glue, obviously the hinge needs to be exposed, otherwise it's not going to actually work as a hinge, and it needs to be about a millimeter clear of the rear of the aircraft. And we also need to make sure that the two halves of the fuselage sit at an equal or equally, I should say, at an equally, so that all of this is running true too. And the other thing we need to check is that they are sitting so that we are creating a nice flat area here, because that's where the horizontal stabilizer sits. So there we go. That's how this hinge sits on the in the aircraft. And see, it's still not fully, hinge is still not fully exposed. There we go. You can actually use, there's a little hip on the plastic part itself, and if that hip remains, bring it up here, that hip there and there remains within the fuselage, but the rest is sitting out of the fuselage. You see there. That's how you want it to actually end up. So in doing that, I've managed to stick the two halves of the plastic together on the wrong side, but that's all right. Just make sure it's all yes. It's better. I'll just use the tweezers to make sure that those plastic parts are sitting on the sidewalls. Good. Okay, we can let that dry off, and I'll get the bottom half of the fuselage detached from the sheet, and we'll start applying. So here is our bottom half, and only one real point to note. At the front of the part here, there is a little bit of a score, and that's to allow the part to bend and conform to the front part of the fuselage, which has a little bit of a bend to it as well. And if you find the score isn't deep enough, then once again you can just run the blade gently through so that it allows it to bend a little more. So this part is D.38, I think. I'm just trimming off some of the excess. Okay. So I'd like to start at the back, and this is a good one for dry fitting. This will take some time to just slot everything in. It'll pop and flip all the way up through. There we go. Seems to effectively, a little bit of pulling at the front there. Let's just check the forward bulkhead there. It set in quite a pushed back place. So anyway, that's all fine now. Let's one area where it wasn't sitting proper here, but I think that's just a nice tight fit, that's all. So there we go. So what we're going to do now is actually glue this into place, not all in one go, because it'll take ages to do that, and the glue will possibly have set by the time we get from one end to the other. A bit like painting the Severn Bridge, as we say down here. Well, we're not in the West Country, but you know what I mean. So let's just do. I'm going to put the glue on the upper faces of the already constructed fuselage. I'm going to take it up to this point here, bring that to frame. I think that's all we need to do there. And then on this part, I'm just going to do the sidewalls. That comes into contact with the sides of the fuselage. What took it to? Yeah. Yeah. There we go. So now we'll just pop everything into place. All the parts should come together and share their glue. There we go, we're going up to that point there. So let's make sure this is all pressed home. And if you do get glue on your finger, then try and get it off as quickly as possible, just so that you don't get it over the rest of the model. Excellent. And then just make sure everything pressed together, and then we'll just leave that to the glue to dry a little bit, and then we can give it a final sort of push together, and so everything comes into place. The other thing is, if you find any of these little pieces overlapping, once it's dry, you can just trim those off so they don't cause too much problems when we come to put the skin on. So we've taken it up to this point so far, and because this stuff is nice and flexible, we can move the part out of the way while we do the next bit. So because it's going so well, I'm probably going to take it all the way through to the nose. Sorry, I'm not stopping for dramatic effect. I'm just having to do and think at the same time, which is quite difficult for me. Right, now, let me side walls here as well. We've got a quite a low ambient temperature today, so the glue isn't pouring out, it's quite controllable, which is nice. Go. Let's get everything seated. It does tend to get glue on your fingers as it squashes out. There we go. Everything certainly come into contact with its adhering surface. So glue has been transferred. And now it's just a matter of, we'll start at the tail where the glue should have dried by now. I've still got a little bit of excess glue on my fingers, so I'll just wipe that off. Let's see, it's the material is very squashy and flexible, so which is a great thing. If I'd done that with a piece of balsa wood, I'd be remaking the fuselage. Keep everything together. Yeah, fantastic. So, as I said, if you've got any of these little tabs that have a slight protrusion outside, then you can just use your knife and just run down, take off any of the excess. And this will make fitting the skin so much easier. You've got a good fresh sanding stick that you can also do the job. I think mine's not that fresh, so but doesn't have enough bite to it. So, well, I'll continue finishing up here, making sure everything is nice and neat, and then we can move on to adding the top of the fuselage. It took a little longer than expected. Had to go and get a fresh cup of tea. Lovely. Oh, that's hot. Right. Let me take the glasses off so I can see what I'm doing. D.89 So this is the lid, and well, I've trimmed down all these sides here so they're nice and as smooth as can be. And we are going to be covering these with some little edging strips before we put the Tyvek skin on. But that'll really help. So anyway, let's get our roof, and the roof sits exactly where you would imagine it would, right on top. So let's just do a quick dry fit to make sure. Here, this bit, there's a slot that it goes into just there. That's it. So that's all looking rather good. Fitting swimmingly. On this one, this bit here, once again, there's a slot that it slots into. There we go. So that's how all of that comes together. Anyway, we just need to glue it into place now. So working from the back, as we did with the underside, start applying our glue. For the slot, and then let's just switch. I'll just pop that over on the edge, and then we will apply to the upper surfaces, upper edge, side panels. We'll take it up to there. Two-step process. Go, and then apply sides. Where we got to? Yeah, I'll do. Right. Let's start in with the slot. Good. I was worried we left that too long, but we haven't. And then there we go. That is in place. Let's again press everything so that the two surfaces come into contact, and then once we're happy the glue is dry, we can push again and it should grab. Okay, now let's just finish off. I would normally probably let that dry, but for the sake of a quick hit, what you'll probably have noticed is that I didn't put any on any of the cross members. That's not too much of a problem, but I will up at this end. We've got that big one just there. So the edges. Turn around. Go. Seems like there's too much glue on those bits, so I just reapplied. Let's just get that into the slot in front before things get too sticky. And then everything else sits in place. Fantastic. Now this side wall here seems to have stuck a little bit too far out. So I'm just going to, the glue's still drying on that, although it's had a few good minutes to set, and just manipulate that in so that now we're closing the gap. Go. So we will let that dry off, and then we're going to give the same treatment to any sort of protruding parts that we may have, or protruding tabs, I should say. Right, let's get the knife out. Just give it a trim. This swarf. That's the only problem with foam, is that it does get a bit staticky. These are pretty good, these tabs. They're very little protruding, but seeing as we're here, we might as well just give them a little bit of the treatment. Rid the knife of the swarf. You find the front of your blade is a little bit lacking in sharpness, then you can use the back of the blade, which doesn't get as much abuse. That tends to work quite well. A little bit of glue holding onto the swarf that had come off. There we go. Quick once over with the landing stick. The other side. So we're getting there. We are getting there with the build. Few more things that we need to do. We have a little part to stick in the tail here to fill in and create a nice platform for the horizontal stabilizer. So that part we need is D44, I think. There we go. And that has a slot in it too, which you might find has got some material in already. So we just need to snag out here it comes. It's never a problem when you're not filming, but of course when you are filming everything sticks. So I find that when I'm flying as well. If anyone's filming, I can very rarely land. Or stick a landing, I should say. Whereas if nobody's filming, they're all perfect. Of course. So let's just pop our D44 part in place. And in fact, I'm not going to put the D44 part in place because there's something very important I've got to do before I put this on. And that is, I need to thread the LED through for the tail light. So I'm going to pop this to one side. We might need to have to put more glue on it, depending on how long it takes us to do this. But we need one white LED and we need an extension cable. There we go. Now the extension cable is actually far too long, but we can cable manage that, not a problem. And I would advise before you install the LED that you actually set up your electronics and test that it all works before installation, because obviously once it's installed it'll be a lot more difficult to replace should it be defective. So I would certainly get those electronics out now, hook up the receiver, get it bound to your transmitter, and plug in your LED system and just check whether all the LEDs work. The other thing is you can physically check just to make sure that all of the connections are as they should be. But basically what we're going to do is plug our extension onto our white LED the right way up, like so. And then we're just going to feed the LED through that final bulkhead. There we go. All the way through, and we can use some tweezers to help guide it. This is why we do it at this point, because we obviously have access to it via all these holes. Through you go. Pop the lead through. There we go. There we go. Right, so it is at a point now I can actually get my paws on it. There we go. And literally we want the cable to be positioned just above the hinge on the rear of the fuselage. So just there. And then we can pop our D44 in place. There we go. Yeah, just enough fluidity in the glue to get that all attached. There we are. No, that's dangerous, putting a knife near the cable, but just to open up that slot, just make sure it's available for the, I think it's actually for the vertical stabilizer to locate. So there we go. Now I'm just going to do a bit of a side shave here. This bulkhead is just, its shoulders are protruding. I think it was just the one side. Maybe just a little bit that side. There we go. So we now have our LED in place, so we don't have to worry about trying to thread that through in a much more difficult scenario. So I'm just going to tidy the cable up, just pop it down into one of the servo holes for now to keep it safe. Right, the last part of the actual physical side of the fuselage, we have a few stringers to set out on top of the aircraft, because if you know that Dragon Rapide, it has a slightly curved top to the roof, and you can see the stringers underneath. Excuse me, another sip of tea. Oh, lovely. Right, so let's get our stringers and their supports. So we've got D40 and D41. And this is where I've just realised I've done this out of sequence, because it's D44 we've just put in the in the back there, just there, and I'm just starting on D40 and 41. Oh, there we go. Anyway, it doesn't really matter about that particular sequence, apart from sticking with the sequence. So those two parts, and we have this very long gangly part, D42. Free, just that bit there. That has been released. There we go, so that long thin piece there. And then we've got two D43s, which are just slightly tapered oblongs of foam. So they get narrower towards one end, and of course that's it narrows as it goes down the fuselage. So D40 and D41. D40 is slightly larger. That goes at the forward position. There's a little slot there that it goes into. It's a very quick installation. In it pops, like so. And D41 does exactly the same, a little bit further down the fuselage. go. So our D42, actually there are a couple of slots for it down the latter end of the fuselage, down here, there and there, and then it slots into the two pieces we've just attached and finishes at the point where the cockpit hatch is. So it just runs all along there. So just a smear of glue down it should do the job. The concentration, dear. So it just needs to sit down on the top of the fuselage. Wherever it comes into contact, it should be stuck down firmly. There we go. And these other two pieces, I'll just tidy up my imprecise cutting. And just establish which end's fatter than the other. And then each one of those should go to the front, through the slots provided, and then go to a point at the rear of the fuselage just here. So once again, it's just a matter of popping on some glue at the appropriate points. And a nice smear all the way down one of the edges as it tapers. And then there we go. Same on the other side. Establish the taper. Still got a little bit of a bulge there from. And I've tapered it a little bit more. Oh well. Okay. Let's just add that glue. It's a little excessive. And then smear all the way down. Boom. Okay. In she goes. As I said, the whole build of this fuselage it's pretty straightforward, but it looks quite sophisticated. Right, so we've got our roof on. We've got our bit in the back. We've got our LED in. There are a couple of other things we can do before this actually gets skinned. And that is we can put in another LED, another white LED. That's going to actually sit at the front of the aircraft. That's the nice big landing light that's so distinctive on the Rapide. And that basically we just need to slot the. In fact, is it easy to go the other way around? Let's experiment. So basically, what we want to do is go through one of the holes here, and then there's a hole in the forward bulkhead here. And then there's obviously another one in the nose itself. So I'm just going to create a curve in the wire. It's quite a delicate little wire, but it should do. We'll pop that through and then see if we can get our bulb to. Oh, there she goes. And then just encourage it through that last hole. There we go. Fantastic. Right, so I'm going to actually just very quickly tidy this cable up by wrapping it somewhat. Coiling it, maybe, is the best way to describe that. And if only I had a tiny little zip tie. But I don't. So what I'm going to do is just coil that round like so and tuck it in through on itself for now. Pop it out of the way. Give myself enough lead. Let's try again. There we go. Then I'll just pop it back down that hole for now. Both ends are available. Just, there we go. So it's all sort of tucked away. Hopefully it won't snag on anything or get damaged. I can pop that into there like so. Okay, the other elements that we be easier for us to thread through at the moment, while we don't have the skin on, are the motor extensions. Now these go in a particular way. We need the male ends up at this position here, where they will plug into the twin ESC receiver, and obviously we need these female plugs to sit out on the wings for the motors in the nacelles to plug into. So see these flex around a bit at the moment, but once they've got the ribs and skin on, they are effective. So anyway, what we want to do is obviously pop this end through this hole here. Probably the easiest way is to go in from outside. Just put a little bit of a curve in just to get it up and over. Maybe a little more of a curve than I'd put in. Go. I can just grab the end with the tweezers and pull it forward. Same on the other side. Once again, same goes for these extension cables. Check first that they are working, essentially, by plugging all the electronics in together and giving it a test. There we go. But what we have to remember is, at the moment, the connector on the left is the one for the right, or it should, well, vice versa really, because of the because we're looking at it from the front. Where's that gone? It's disappeared up there. Yeah. Let's try again. Me not concentrating and doing too much talking. They've both both falling out now. So anyway, look, what I should have done is brought that through and then locked that off into one of those rib spaces. There we go. And done that on this side as well. But what I was trying to say was the extension cable, these two here are the opposite to the cables on the outside. So this particular connector is linked to this one here, and this connector is linked to that one there. So when it comes to plugging in, if you've got differential set up, or differential thrust set up on your receiver, then it will work in the wrong way if we plug those two into the corresponding plugs on the receiver as it stands. So we've just got to remember that that should really go to the ESC on this side, and this particular plug should go to the ESC on this side. Or you set up your differential thrust within your receiver through the app, and you just switch the differential thrust to reverse it. Did that make any sense? It did in my head, but that's not to say it made sense to anyone else. Right, last piece of the puzzle for now. This is the servo Y cable, and the servos for the ailerons sit in the lower wing outside of the nacelle. So we need to pop this through those little holes that we've just put the motor leads through. So it might have been an idea that I put the motor leads in after I put these through. Then it wouldn't be so restricted. But anyway, we'll give it a go, and if it works out, it works out. If not, I'll have to take the motor leads out and try again. Anyway, right, let's put a bit of a curve into this one, and here we go. Let's just see. I can see it's going to be a problem already. So let's take the motor leads out for now. Let's put those back later. Now, I do hope you've watched this video in its entirety before building. Otherwise, you'll be making the same mistakes that I do. But at least we're making them together. We're making them together. Right. Let's go. So that's at the door, so to speak. Now I can hopefully just delicately carriage that through, or not. It's all a matter of the angle of the dangle, I think. I'm just trying to remember how I did it in previous builds, because I'm sure it wasn't this difficult. Anyway, maybe somebody can give me a clue. Yeah, there we go. Just through. So definitely lock this off. And then to the second one, I might get some curve on the cable. It's worth checking these connectors because they're quite delicate. Well, they can be. Obviously, once it's all installed, it's all quite stable. But until then, definitely down to this angle of insertion. But I won't subject you to any more of this fettling. I will come back to you once it's complete. Finally, actually, once the cameras were off, or the camera was off, it was quite easy. Pressure's off. So anyway, we've got our electronics now installed. I've just temporarily used these the little cutouts in these protrusions to lock the electronics in, so they don't pull through or get snagged and they're not too much in the way. But for now, that is the entirety of the fuselage airframe built. So on to the next stage of covering this wonderful little piece of engineering. So the next step for us in this Dragon Rapide build is to, as you can see, one I have prepared earlier. Don't worry about the bendy bits there; they'll straighten out once we've got the ribs on. But the next step is to get the skin onto, or certainly the majority of the skin onto the fuselage. So this is what we hope it will result in. But currently, this is the stage we're at. So we have a naked airframe, and we need to get it covered. So let me get those bits that we require to start the covering process, and we'll get going. Now this is the one of the two fuselage sheets that you'll have in the pack, in the kit, and we're going to start with these unusual pieces here. We've got T15, that's T13, T14, T12, T11. Now these have actually been numbered by pen because this is part of the prototype build, but obviously we're not going to go and write the numbers on each and every sheet for this kit, so they'll be printed on your kit. We'll take T11 and T12 first, and it's just a simple matter of cutting them out of the sheet like so. I'll continue on with that, and I'll come back to you once the parts are free. So we've got T11, 12, and 13 there. Let's just get rid of the sheet for now. And these parts, let's just get the fuselage. These parts actually form some edging strips that the actual main bulk of the fuselage skin adheres to. So, for example, you have these parts that go all the way down here. I'll show you how to shape them in a minute. In fact, I think it's over on that side. So yeah, it's over on the other side, and we'll get these things shaped up. So what we have to do initially is, with our straight edge, turn these parts over to the unprinted side, and we need to score down the center of them. And fortuitously, we've actually put these little nicks in to either end of each part, so you know where you're scoring. So literally put your straight edge in place, so. And then run the back edge of your blade. It's the back edge, not the front edge, or we cut it, just end up cutting it in half. Back edge of the blade down there, and then we should be able to just fold it over to sort of around about 90 degrees, like so. Move on to our next one. You've got to hold the ruler down fairly firmly. I've got a slightly undulating cutting mat as well, which doesn't help matters, but with the pressure we can overcome. So these edging parts really do help with adhering the Tyvek to the fuselage itself. It also means that you don't need to use that much in the way of glue to get a really nice result. So notch to notch, lots of pressure. Something weird just bubbled up then. Must have been off the. That was probably on the edge of the straight edge. So let's try that again. Notch to notch. There we go. Okay. Move that straight edge out of the way for now. And there we go. Just folding that score over on itself. So just check which side. So what we want is that running to a point there. So that's on that side like so. So that part sits there. This bit sits there, and this obviously sits on the forward part, just like so. So let's get to gluing these parts in place. Now what I'm going to do, using the foam to foam, which is our Tyvek safe glue, I'm actually going to add the glue onto the foam fuselage itself. It's just bigger and easier to manage than popping it onto the little strips of Tyvek. So let's just run our glue down the one edge and then back up the other. So move that point there. There we go. Cap back on, and we need to pop that part. I'm just going to give it a little more on that fold, so it just goes slightly beyond 90. Go. Just press it home into place, and then I'll just let it sit there, and we'll let the glue go off, and then we can give a final push to it. So this part, you'll notice we've got a notch cut out there for this particular protrusion. So that sits there like that. We've got a little bit of an overlap there, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move this part. We should still have a little bit of sliding available to us. Slide that back slightly, so that goes right to the back of the aircraft there, right to the tail. And then that should fit nicely with no overlap. Yeah. So let's just pop some glue. Once again, onto the fuselage, where this particular joining piece is going to sit. Go. Just put that on there. You can also use obviously things like the back of the knife to make sure stuff is stuck down, or at least coming to contact with the glue that I put on there, so that when we do come to give it its final nudge, it all tacks down nice and quickly without any resistance. So on to the next part, and that just sits there like so, as I showed previously. So let's just pop some more glue on. Is that enough? Didn't go down far enough, did I? That goes all the way to the nose, of course. Go. Put that on like so. The thing about using the knife to push stuff down is means I don't get glue on my fingers, which then, if I transfer over to some nice light coloured or light printed tieback, means that I could create a mark. Okay, so I've done that one side. I've yet to push everything down into place, but as you can see, it's now taking quite nicely. There we go. I will. I'll carry on. I'll do this this other side, which is obviously just the opposite of what we've done, and then we can move to putting the edging down the top part of the fuselage. So we have applied the corner pieces, these joining pieces, to the bottom corners of our fuselage, and now we need to do the same for the top pieces here, which, let's have a look. It's this part here. We've got T19 and T20, and we've got T13 and T14 on this part. So I'll just get these four parts free, and we will start putting them on. So I've got T13 and T14 here. I've left the other two on the other sheet, and we can start by doing exactly the same to these, scoring them. Now these are actually unprinted because, well, they're white essentially, because the top of the fuselage for this particular aircraft is white. So we'll just make sure that when we come to putting the second lot on, we ensure we score it on the correct side. I think this is the reverse side. Go like so. So we'll just bend that, pre-bend that before putting it onto the fuselage. As you see, well, you'll have made the nacelles already, so you know what the tieback's like. It's very much like paper or a thin card in that respect. So there we go. And on this one, I did notice that for some reason we haven't notched this one here. So I'll endeavour to do that in the cut file before we go into production. Just want to make sure we get this on the correct side. So I think if it curves down, that's the reverse. So let's just do that. Oh, let's try again. Go right that way. So I'm judging it by making sure that the ruler is equidistant from the little the cut-ins. There we go. Okay, just fold this over too. So there are various little cutouts here that should correspond to the various bits and pieces or holes, etc., on the side of the aircraft, on the fuselage. What you will notice is that there is a little hole here. You can see we put a little bit of carbon fibre in that to help line up the upper wing. There's no hole cut in this part here. That has been rectified. So what I'll do is I'll just notch that out before we go any further. Just mark where that is. My pen actually worked. Go. So I'll notch that out. And the other important part is just here, and that is where the plywood brace enters into the fuselage from the wing. So we just need to make sure that that is kept open. That should this particular joining piece should come up flush with the front face of the bulkhead here. So that's how it sits. Right, I'll just notch that out and we'll put this in place. Go. I'm sure we've got that fold going on. Get some glue going down. There we go. Take it all the way back to, I think it's there. There we go. I'm not actually going to put any on the top side there because we've got this slightly angled roof. So what we are going to have is the top half of the joining piece just sitting there waiting to receive the roof when it's applied. So pop that down, make sure it's flush at the front there, and then we'll turn our attentions back to that once the glue has had time to dry off, just making sure that that hole there is free. So next stage, on with this next part, and once again we're not going to glue the top part of the joining piece to the fuselage, just the side part here, due to that slightly angled roof or deck. All the way back to there. There we go. Right, let's pop that on. just make sure that the fold corresponds to the edge of the fuselage underneath. Okay, so we'll let that dry off, and I shall do the other side, and we'll get back to skinning the fuselage. So we now have, it's quite hard to see, but we've got the edge pieces on both sides here. Next step is to start putting the main slabs or covering on the fuselage. So T21, the other one's T22. So let's just check. T22, that's T23. So we'll put the sides on first. That's obviously how I envisaged it. So we will grab this piece and look at the technique on getting that onto the fuselage, as if by magic. So on this particular part, we've got some fairly key areas, such as down here, which fits over the spars that come out of the fuselage, and obviously leave a gap for the wires that come out too. So that's a good place to start to position the part in place, and then you can, I mean, the best thing to do here is just to dry fit it, just so you get a good idea of how it all goes together. It should be a fairly precise fit, because I spent ages making sure it was. And obviously it should come to the front there and sit astride those spars coming out of the fuselage. So what we can do is stick this down in a number of different, or a number of stages, I should say, and just to make sure we get good alignment. And we can actually start by putting the center of the part down onto the fuselage frame. So the easiest way to do that is just to add glue, and literally we don't actually have to add any glue in the center area here. If we just use the edges to bring the part together, and that's actually going to be best. It means that we don't use too much glue, and so we're not adding too much weight to the fuselage itself. Obviously we will need to put some glue down there, because that's where it sits against the fuselage, and possibly just a little around these vital areas here where we have some interaction, and then just bring it to there, bring it along to there, just under where the cables come out. Then we can position our part onto the fuselage, and if we do this while the glue is still wet, then we get the opportunity to shift it around a bit too, so just to make sure we get the best fit possible. Get some wires out of the way. I'll get my chubby fingers in there, so use the knife, and then I'm just making sure that we've got good alignment on the various holes that are I'm just wiping my fingers off, getting some of the glue off that's been put there that doesn't need to be there. Just beating it off so it doesn't spoil our build later. So anyway, let's just make sure our fuselage is where we need it to be, our skin, I should say. So we've got good alignment on the bottom, great on the top. That's it. We set down properly, and once again we can use, like we did on the nacelles, and we can use the back handle or the back of the handle on the knife just to press this material down firmly so that the glue gets the opportunity to grab and bond well. Make sure you get rid of any glue, any excess glue that's come off on the handle. And good. Okay, so we've got the skin partially down. Now we can continue. Now we've sort of got it all nicely aligned. We can continue to adhere it to the places it needs to bond to. So, such as here at the nose end, what we can do is just lift this up, add glue around the edges, and where it's going to sit against the fuselage as well, where we don't actually have any the joining parts, just to make sure we get a good fit. And gently bring the skin to bear on those areas. So just going to let that dry off whilst it's free from the fuselage itself, and then bring that once the glue has had a chance to dry off a bit, bring that down onto the fuselage frame. So the back here, I'm going to do this in a couple of stages, just to make it easier for myself. Just start adding the glue to the edges once again. And this is where we've got to be careful with any excess glue squeezing out, that we get rid of it as quickly as possible so that it doesn't form any marks or blobs onto the finished product. So I'm just making sure we get glue onto both the fuselage and the skin, and then once again we'll let that dry off. Whilst we're doing that, we can bring the forward part to bear on its fuselage skin. Use our trusty blade handle to flap things down nicely. There we go, it's a really nice smooth finish. It's just brushing off their little beads of glue that have become present on the surface, just to make sure they've gone. Concentrate on getting that edge firmly adhered. Go. So last bit right at the tail here. Obviously what you want to try and avoid is actually folding this material, because if you do crease it, it's a little more difficult to get that crease out. Finalize. There we go. So once again, I'm going to let that glue essentially evaporate some of the solvent within it, because if you've used Tyvek before, you know that it can get affected by petrol-based solvents, and there is some in foam to foam, but this works a lot better than other contact adhesives that we've used in the past. So but the general rule is just let it sweat off a bit first, and then bring the part to bear on the surface you're gluing it to. So anyway, I'll finish this off in the same way that I've finished the rest of that side, and then I shall apply the other side to the fuselage. There's no need for you to see that or endure that. So I'll crack on with that and come back when we need to start applying the bottom of the fuselage. So we now have the skin on both sides of the aircraft. I have done a little bit of shaving of the part here, so it lies flush with this back plate here, which is where the horizontal stabilizer is going to sit. I've made some adjustments on the cut file, so hopefully you won't have to do the same, but it's worth keeping an eye out on this area here just to make sure that you've got a nice flat platform, so that the horizontal stabilizer is actually horizontal. So we now move on to applying our next part, which is the bottom of the fuselage. And we've done it in one whole piece. We could have split it down, but if you use the method that we've been using so far in doing it piece by piece, because this is nice and flexible and we can fold it back, then you're not going to go too far wrong. So once again, with anything that we do with our builds, it's always good to have a dry fit first, just to make sure that everything is sitting where it needs to. You get a good idea of where everything's supposed to be positioned. The one thing that we can do here is, because we've got a little V shape at the front here, a bit of a V profile, we can actually just put a score down the center here. And it doesn't go all the way down, obviously. It's really only to around about there, but we're doing it on the back side here. So I'm actually just going to very carefully just mark with a pen on the inside there, just make that a little more obvious with the ruler, and then just going to place this sort of as centrally as possible, and then literally for what will be 1, 2, 3, 4 centimeters, 40 millimeters, and just put a score there, so we get a bit of a fold, like so, and that should help get a little bit of definition when we come to place the base part, the under part in position. So as you can see here, it sits on the sort of second former down, just there. We're going to have obviously the nose piece, which you've probably seen in the kit. It's a clear piece at the moment, but we shroud it in Tyvek, apart from the part at the front, which is the landing light. So that sits there, and everything falls into place, and should make it all the way back to the back of the fuselage there. So we can actually, and it'd probably be more accurate if we start our gluings at the front here. So that's what we'll do. My foam to foam ready, and ruler to one side. Let's just apply a little bit of glue to where that front of the piece is going to sit, just there, and then run some down the sides here. There. So I'm running it as close to the edge as possible, and as thin a film as I dare. And what I'm going to do, rather than bring this part to bear, I'm going to just add thin film to the opposing side as well. I mean, you can do this a number of ways. The reason I'm doing it like this is to try and avoid getting too much excess glue rolling around all over the place. So I'm just going to let those two dry off, and then I'll bring the parts together to start the process of skinning the bottom of the fuselage. So with the power of pausing the video and starting again, we now have dry glue, and because this is now more of a contact adhesive. It's very important that we get this aligned as we stick. So there we go. I think that is pretty much where I want it to be. Then I will use the power of the knife. Just get that down. There we go. So now we just have to work backwards. And get our bottom part of the fuselage adhered. So just a matter of, once again, same process. Take it as far as you feel you can. Push it a little bit. There we go. Make sure we've got a good coverage. And just smooth this down to make sure. Get the glue on both sides. A little splurged out there. Get rid of that before it causes a problem. A little bit on that side too. And then just let that fall open for a while. Let the air get to it and vent. And then we will, as soon as we've got it relatively dry, we will come and press that home too. So I'll pause again and we'll wait for that to happen, and then I'll show you that process. Yay! Let's do this. We have an exiting tail LED. Let's just put that back in so it doesn't go wandering off. Right. There we go. Bring that knife into play. Go. Now these edges here, you can actually, using the back of the knife, you can actually reduce that tiny little sort of white line that you get from the edge of the cut of the material. It takes a little while. It just needs a little what I suppose technically is known as burnishing of the material, and there are still little, and you always get this, little globules of glue that bubble up here and there. The steel of the knife is quite good at getting those gradually to move away. I mean, you can go at this for hours to sort of keep reducing it and creating just a smoother junction between the meeting materials. It really depends on how much time you do want to spend on doing it. And it's a task with, I guess, sort of diminishing returns. There's only so far that you can take it, but it's worth having a go. So anyway, you get the technique. I won't bore you with the whole process, and I'll do that on my own time rather than yours. I'm just peeling off the glue that's sitting there in the junction of the materials. So anyway, I haven't quite finished popping this down yet, have I? So once again, we can burnish all these edges on the sides as well. They all should meet up quite nicely, so that the whole process is made a lot easier too. Don't have to do it. You can actually just leave it with a nice sharp edge, and it's once it's in flight, it would be very difficult to see any imperfection in that join anyway. But as I say, it's about how much time you want to spend on the build itself. So anyway, let's just finish off the tail here. So once again, same technique, running a smear of glue down the edge. Back up the other. Transferring it over to the opposite side. So then just leaving it open so that use of a mug. There we go. So that's just hanging down there. Let that dry off, and once again bring it all together. So okay, let's finish this off. There we go. So there we go. That's the underside of the fuselage now on. I will be burnishing these edges in my own time. As I said, I won't bore you with that. And the next step is to get that part of the roof of the aircraft. So here we have T24, which sits on the deck upper side of the fuselage here. Before we put it on, there is a little bit of scoring that we can do just to enhance. You can see it on the video, but there's some shading that sort of represents the underlying stringers of the airframe, and what we can do is actually just enhance that by scoring underneath, just to give it a little bit of an edge. So to do that, we need to, because we're going to score on the underside, we need to just indicate where those scores are going to be. So I'm going to run 2 scores down the center here that are going to coincide with the edges of the stringer. So I've just lightly marked using a small sort of incision really where that those 2 scores want to be. and I'm just gonna. I'm not doing it as hard as I would on the other scores, but just to get. Just to get a little bit of shape to the part. So, and then I'm going to mark these other ones as well. I'm just going to put single scores down. So I'm not even bending them myself. It's actually just the pressure of doing it puts in a little bit of a dent. So there we go, and as you can see, it's already curved that part by just introducing those scores, and you can actually see certainly that center one is quite prominent now. So hooked up a bit of hardware back, let's get rid of the straight edge, and then just pop the part on just to make sure we know where it's going. And the other thing you can do before putting it on is just make sure that these sort of edge parts here, the connecting pieces, are raised up slightly so they're not lying flat against the top of the fuselage. Because obviously these are the pieces that our top part comes into contact with and glues to. So if they are facing up like this, then any downward pressure is going to bring these parts to bear on the underside edge of our top piece. So on this particular part, I am going to add glue to both sides. Let's just check. That goes up to that cross member there. So I'll add glue carefully. All the way down this one side. Go. To that cross member there, and then obviously pop some glue across there, and you can also run a little down that center part as well. So let that dry off, and then I'm going to also run glue on the contacting parts around the edge of our Tyvek roof. Go down the other side. and give that a good few minutes to dry off before attaching it. Right, we've had some drying time. Now let's pop our hatch on. So what's the best way to do this? Let's start. Oh, stop. Let's stop, because we've forgotten something. Obviously we have another piece of the roof that goes here, and there is a joining piece that sits there, so we don't want to forget that. In fact, what we can do is we can place that, so this is T25. There we go, T25. You can place that there. So that goes on the underside of this part here, like so. So there's some glue there already, so that's sticking nice and firmly, and I will just run some glue on the outside of that now that we've covered that patch of glue up. So let's just add a little more glue there. And we could let that now dry, but let's start the whole process again. So don't forget to put that little joining piece on there. Wasn't exactly where I wanted it. I'm going to try the method that I normally reserve for the Microaces kits, where you literally stick one side down on the edge where you want it. So, and then fold that over and join it to the other side. That's the risk paid off. Oh. Doesn't look too bad to me. Once we get our burnishing done down there, should work out pretty perfectly. Seem to have a little speck of something in there. Just remove that. So once again, we can use the back edge of a knife to bring everything together. Making sure it's all sitting down firmly on the fuselage. So that's all looking very good. So excellent. So there we have our first part of the roof on. We're going to leave this part off. We're going to probably install just before we put the upper wing on, and go from there. So so for now, I think we have completed the next step of the construction of our Dragon Rapide, and so from here on in, I think what we'll do next is the tail section. So let's get prepared for that.